Good morning. We'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. At this time, you could all join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. At this time, is there any public comment? Noting no public, can I get a verification of the posting of the agenda, please?
Pam Moore, for the record, the agenda was posted on June 26th between the hours of 1 and 5 at the locations listed on the agenda in accordance with statutes.
Thank you, Pam. Can I get an approval of the agenda as submitted?
I move to approve the agenda as submitted.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Motion carries. Consideration and possible action, approval of the minutes of the meeting held on June 6, 2024. A motion, please.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of June 6th, 2024.
Second it.
All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Motion carries. Moving on to our appointments, 7A, update on the Carson River Watershed 30-year regional drought and water sustainability study. Ed?
Good morning, Commissioners.
That little button on the very bottom. Yep.
Oh, there we go. For the record, Ed James with the Carson Water Subconservancy District. And today I'm here to give you kind of an update on this 30-year regional water plan that we are currently working on. This is not the final report. It's still going to be worked on, but I wanted to give communities an update of what's happening, the information. We've gathered a lot of information, and the work will be now being done by the USGS. So again, this is the idea, just an update, and if you have any questions afterwards. Whoops, went too fast. Okay, there we go. So the idea behind this is to look at the watershed's needs in the next 30 years, what's happening. And so what we've done is we've hired Loomis and Associates who've helped us meet with all the different water purveyors. There are 13 major water purveyors we work with. Our focus this time right now is on 9. We will get to the other 4 later on, but these are the main ones that are in where the modeling has worked. The USGS has created 2 models in the upper watershed. One is in the Carson Valley that they have developed years ago, and the other one is the middle Carson, which basically goes from Carson City to Lahontan. So these models have been developed, and so the information that is being gathered by Loomis will be inputs into this modeling effort. Also, we've been gathering some other information. So right now, Loomis has been gathering the M&I demands for the next 30 years. We are gathering it. We've met with the USGS. We are providing that information to them as we move forward. And then ultimately, this will be looking at, when they run it into the model, what is the impacts? What are the impacts to the groundwater levels? And what are the impacts to service flows? And this will give us a better understanding if there are concerns and conflicts in the upper watershed impacting down here in Lahontan. If there are, we identify how we can try to mitigate those as we move forward. So this is just basically an overall view. The goal is just to provide information to all the entities. But what this will not do, will take anyone's water rights away. We're not here to identify if they're active or not. It will not propose any changes to the Alpine Decree or the state Nevada water law. Basically, those are the parameters that we were working within. And this will not change any water purveyor's master plan. This is not a master plan in itself, but when a water entity is updating their master plan in the future, hopefully this will be additional information that they can incorporate into their master planning, because a lot of times they don't consider the stuff that we are currently working on in their master planning, and this would hopefully move forward. If they have to have a new well put in, they may say, oh, based on this other study, if we put it close to the river, we're going to have more impacts to the flows, so maybe we need to move it further away and other things in their study process. So this is the ultimate goal on that. But before I get, I want to give you a little background. I'm going to first focus on surface flows, and then we'll talk about groundwater. And just again, general background information that is going in as part of the modeling effort. This was a study done by DRI several years ago for us. And what they did was they looked at the flows on the east fork of the Carson River in Gardnerville. So this is upstream of Carson Valley. Basically what kind of Mother Nature's coming in there, because there's very little upstream storage or agriculture upstream of this gauge. And what they did was they looked at the flows. They took the period of 41 to 2009 and they split the data set. And then they said, how much is a fraction of that flow in each of the month in those different periods occur? And I'd like to point out to you, if you look at the March, you'll see that in March that there are more flows coming off now than there were historically. And then if you look at June, you'll see that there's less flows coming off now than there was historically. And so what we're seeing is there's a shift in runoff patterns on the Upper Carson. So we are seeing water coming off sooner. Now, what does this mean? Well, if you're a farmer in Carson Valley or in Lyon County, you're going to have less water later in the season. And so does that mean you go to more well pumping, or does that mean you just don't irrigate as much? So these are some of the things that we're providing in our data set. The other thing that we looked at, and this was kind of interesting, this was part of the Middle Carson model that was originally done by USGS, and they showed this graph a couple of years ago. And you can see that the flow on the average, this is the water year mean daily, and there's a lot of scattering all over the place, but statistics, they ran this line through here, and you can see from 1940 to 2021 that the flows have been decreasing at the Carson City gauge. Now, there was a lot of concerns right away that was this because of all the upstream development in Carson Valley. And so this was a real concern with the community, especially down here, of what's causing all this huge drop. They also did one for the one at Fort Churchill. You can see it also has that same drop. The period's a little longer, but it's interesting that the line kind of flattens out in the 20s, 2000s basically forward. So there was definitely still some issues and water was dropping. One of the things that we asked the USGS is, did they look upstream, above Carson Valley? They did not, so one of my staff members got the information, the statistical modeling, and we did run this, and this is on the East Fork at the Gardnerville gauge, and you can also see that there's a downward trend. So this kind of indicates that even upstream of all this development, we're seeing an impact. So Mother Nature is not providing as much as we did historically, and this is going from 1940 forward. So there are some concerns, and then this is on the West Fork. So again, same trend. So we are seeing some changes, and we even talked about what future climate change and all these other impacts might have on flows. So there's definitely a concern that we're seeing and trying to figure out how we want to model this as these flow rates decrease. There was also another study done by Loomis Associates several years ago for us, and I will have you look at the lower row. And this one, they looked at calculating the percent change in flows from 1940 to 2018. And you can see on the West Fork, it's just under 8% less flows coming into the West Fork gauge. And again, this is upstream of Carson Valley. The East Fork was about 4%. Now, the East Fork is a much larger watershed and also higher elevation. So if you add the two coming into the Carson Valley, it's just under 5% reduction that we're seeing coming into Carson Valley. Now you'll see it jumps up to 9%, so there is definitely something happening in Carson Valley that's impacting the flows historically as we're going through Carson Valley when you get to Carson City. And then when you get to Fort Churchill, you'll see it's a negative 3.74%, which is interesting, which is less than what you have at the combine of the East and the West Fork coming into Carson Valley. Well, one of the probably main reasons is that there's a lot less agriculture in Carson City and Lyon County than there was historically. So all that water that was historically being consumed by the farmers are no longer being consumed at this point as they move forward. So just kind of focusing on the upper and lower watershed, our study. We will be looking at some water demands in Churchill County, but right now our focus really is above Lahontan. There was a big push, and we wanted to get this information to the USGS. There is not a groundwater model in Churchill County at this point, so we're just focusing upstream. I wanted to point out that there are 5 major groundwater basins in this watershed, the Carson water. The upper one is the Carson Valley, which is around the Minden, Gardnerville area kind of focus. Then we have Eagle Valley, which is really mostly Carson City. Then we have Dayton Valley, which covers Dayton and Stagecoach area. And then we have the Churchill Valley Groundwater Basin. And Churchill Valley Groundwater Basin is not in Churchill County. It's the Silver Springs area, and so it covers that area there. What's interesting is the groundwater basin here is called the Carson Desert. So this way we keep people guessing on where they actually are, which watershed. So these are the major water purveyors. Again, we're really just focusing on the upper stream. We didn't do any work now with the Markleyville Water Company, but it's quite small, less than 200 connections. We haven't done anything really also with the Story County, though we have looked at their future demands, but their demands are fairly limited at this time. And then we didn't do anything with the City of Fallon or Churchill County. So all the rest that we have included in our analysis. So some historic trends that we're seeing, and this is now focusing kind of on the groundwater basin. And this data was taken from the state engineer's groundwater pumping data. The top line, the blue line, is the total water pumped in Carson Valley over the years. You'll see down below the green line, that is for agricultural. And you'll see that during dry years, they pump a lot more, and then wet years, they pump less. So agricultural pumping in Carson Valley could be either greater or less than the municipal water use. The municipal is the orange line. And then they have domestic wells and some other water uses in there. There's a trend line up there, and you can see that over the period, the water use in Carson Valley is going up slightly. But I will point out that from basically 2018 forward, Carson City gets about 2,500 acre feet now from the town of Minden. There's a regional pipeline that brings water to the north. It was put in there because of arsenic levels. When the arsenic went from 50 to 10, basically everything north of the Minden Airport no longer met the water quality. And so the regional pipeline was a much more cost effective than everyone trying to do their own surface or groundwater treatment with an arsenic. And so they've now, but they also provide water to Carson City. Carson City had some wells with uranium issues. And so again, this was a way of providing water resources. So it wasn't because Carson was running out of water or any other communities. It was driven mostly because of water quality. This is our projections based on what we're seeing. The gray is the current groundwater pumping that's occurring on a long-term average, basically, I think it was 5 or 6 years the US or Loomis did. And then the orange is our projection over the next 30 years of how much water is going to be used. Now, this is not connections. This is actual water use. Because I've had a couple people say, well, wait a minute, it looks like we have a lot more building going on. Yeah, but the amount of water being used by each building is less than it was historically. So this is Eagle Valley. And this shows Eagle Valley. The green is the total. The orange is the municipal water use. So the biggest user in Eagle Valley is Carson City. Now this is just pumping in Eagle Valley. This does not include all the other water resources they have. In fact, most of their growth in the future, Carson City, will be coming from the Quill plant. It's a surface water treatment plant that they have. They have to upgrade it, and once they upgrade it, they'll be able to take more of the Ash, Kings Canyon, and Marlette water system. So they see a lot more of their growth in the future coming from that. Interesting, you'll see it jumping up in 2021, 22. I was looking at the data kind of wondering why it jumped so much, and it basically was pandemic. When people weren't going to work, they were staying home, and they used more water. So it was kind of interesting that we actually could see that trend of people coming over. We do have the data for 2023, and it dropped down significantly. You know, it was also 23 was a very cold, wet year too. But it is kind of interesting how you can see the trends. But even with that, you can see there's a slight trend line of using less water today than they were historically. This is their projection. This is just Eagle Valley, and this is how much water they're currently using on average. The blue and then the green is what they anticipate in the next 30 years of future demand they'll call. In Dayton Valley, so this here, the blue line is the total demand. The bigger user is the M&I. They do have agricultural, the green, so during dry years they do pump more, and it kind of swings it up and down. Interesting, the long-term average out there has been going down. They have not, even though they've seen significant growth, due to water conservation and everything, the demands have actually kind of steadied or actually decreased over the years. However, they do look at a lot of growth potential, And so you can see the blue, and then the orange is their future demands. So we do anticipate a fair amount of growth in the Lyon County area in the future. Churchill groundwater, this is Churchill Valley. The blue again is the total. What's interesting here is if you look at the yellow line, that's domestic wells. The biggest user in Churchill Valley is domestic well users. They have about almost 1,400 domestic wells, and the state engineer assumes 1 acre foot per domestic well in calculating their total demands. The orange is the municipal use, and it's been decreasing somewhat. It's steady, but it's also gone down a bit due to conservation efforts. They do have some ag wells, and they do pump periodically from those. But the trend line is showing a little less water today. The one thing, though, is that if you know about perennial yield, the perennial yield in this area is about 1,600 acre feet. And you can see by the blue line, we're already about 2,400. So it's above the perennial yield. However, one thing with the shortfall with perennial yield, it doesn't calculate all the return from septics, reclaimed water use, and other things going in. And the other thing is when we talked with the people out in the Silver Springs area, most of those domestic well users probably do not use an acre foot. Most of them are on trailers and all that. They're probably a half a foot or less in their total usage. So we're probably close within that perennial yield number. But it's just something that this is, again, reports from the U.S. or from the state engineer. But it's something to be aware of as we start projecting. So one of the things that, even though the municipal water district out there has over about 4,500 acre feet of water right, permitted water rights, most of that is paper. We don't see a significant growth in that area. Probably about 63 acre feet is what they have that they could probably grow in their community. If they want to do any significant growth out there, they're going to need another water supply. It's going to have to come from somewhere else. It can't come from the groundwater because it's just not available at this time. And so when we do our modeling, this is what we're assuming in here for this area. So other considerations, change in agricultural and agricultural management. Right now, the models that the USGS has assumes that agricultural practices are staying the same. We're not quite sure if that's a true statement or not. So my staff and I are looking into this. We're seeing if they're seeing changes, what's the impact, and then also talking with the farming community says, well, okay, if it gets drier, are you going to be pumping more, or what do you anticipate your practices may be in the future? So we'll be having that. These may be just numbers that we would give and then have the USGS run the model without this assumptions and then putting in some assumptions of changes in agriculture. Then we'll start looking at dry years, wet years, climate change. What would that do to the overall demands? Again, we're following the river regulations with the Alpine Decree, and this modeling is supposed to give us a better estimate. Again, what are these anticipations? You know, right now, if you talk to people, some people think that every drop of water pumped is taking water that should come to Lahontan, others say it has no impact. This will basically get us to a closer number that we can start dealing with as we start looking, and then again, identifying if there's an impact, what's the amount of the impact, and how can we mitigate that to ensure that all water users are protected in this watershed. This is just kind of an interesting one with the pumping in Carson Valley. It fluctuates, and I don't have my glasses, I can't remember now which line is the blue, red, but basically as you get more water in the river, they're pumping less water. And I think, and when you have less water in the river, they're pumping a lot more. And I think the orange is the groundwater pumping. And it seems to us that over the years, the peaks are getting higher and the low ones are still higher too. So we think that there's maybe more pumping occurring in Carson Valley today than there was historically, but we're trying to analyze this data to make sure. This is something that we have to get into. Otherwise, again, the USGS would have just assumed that it was status quo, and we don't know if that's quite correct. So we are working at that and looking at that more closely. So the goals of this thing is to determine if there's significant water and infrastructure in place to meet the demands for every user in the Carson watershed. Understanding the effects of future demands and river discharge. If they're pumping more, what's the impact on the groundwater? What's the impact of the river? And making sure that those people And if there's any possible mitigation that needs to be made, we're looking at trying to identify that. So again, protecting all water users on the watershed. So with that, we're hoping to have results within a year and a half. And so when I come back next time, you'll actually have results. But I think it's always helpful for you to be aware that this is going on versus at the end, here's the results, and you're like, wait a minute, what was happening and all this? Because there's been a lot of work already done. We have a working group of all the water purveyors. I know Chris Mahanis here, he's on that working group, and we'll be having more working meetings as we start getting the results from the USGS. So we feel that we're all on the same page as we move forward. So with that, are there any questions?
Any questions or comments for Ed? All right, thank you for your time. Very important for us.
Thank you.
Moving on to 7B, consideration and possible action, approval of a sending site application filed by Denver Niagara for property located at 6725 Stillwater Road, APN 009-091-05, consisting of 80 acres with 65.95 acres of irrigated water right on property, whereby the applicant proposes to place a conservation easement on the property. Randy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and fellow commissioners. Randy Hines, Church County Public Works Director. This application is for approval of sending site and transfer development rights. The property meets the minimum acreage and dust control requirements to qualify as an acceptable sending site, as well as benefits the community by agriculture preservation with water right retention, protection of military operations, and protection of water recharge area. Based on the transfer development right calculations, total TDRs for the property was 98. Sending site committee reviewed the application on May 20th of 2024, and the planning commission on June 12th of 24, both approving the sending sites as well as the 98 TDRs.
Any questions or comments for Randy? Is there any public comment? Noting none, I'll entertain a motion, please.
I move A, to approve the sending site application for Denver Niagara on APN 009-091-05, based on providing the community benefits of preserving 80 acres of farmland with surface water rights, protecting nearby military operations, and protection of water recharge areas. And B, to approve 98 transferable development rights, TDRs, for the same property.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye, motion carries. Thank you, Randy. Appointment 7C, consideration and possible action, application for continued support funding for domestic violence intervention in the amount of $4,000 for fiscal year 2024. I believe Karen's here to speak on this.
Okay, thank you so much for scheduling us to come to you to get our annual funding. The county has supported us for many, many years, and I just want to always say how grateful we are, because it's very hard to produce match money and raise cash and in-kind donations in a small community where everybody's doing the same thing. So we feel quite lucky that you're still supporting us, and we appreciate that. Pam, did they get the statistics? Let me see what I can find. I sent our statistics, and I didn't know if you had any questions on our services that we've provided for a whole year. But we still have a shelter. We provide emergency motel nights. We do peer counseling, help with TPOs, go to court advocacy. And now that the state has the NV Court self-help webpage, we can help people download documents they need for filing for divorce or custody or motions on their own. So we don't give legal advice, of course, but we can help them fill out the paperwork. Do you have any questions?
Is there any questions or comments for Karen? Is there any public comment? I'll entertain a motion, please.
Make a motion to approve funding in the amount of $4,000 for FY 2024 for domestic violence intervention.
Second it.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And we'll go ahead and take a picture up front here. All right, moving on to appointment 7D, consideration and possible action, the EK Economic Consultants Incorporated 2024 update to the Churchill County Housing Needs Assessment and Labor Market Study for the Churchill County Employment Region. And I believe we have Eugenia online.
Yes, good morning, Manager Barbie, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. For the record, I'm Eugenia Larmore. I'm president of EK Economic Consultants, and we were retained to do 2 studies for Churchill County this time. We did a housing needs assessment and kind of in the related area, a labor market study. And we worked with the Center for Regional Studies at the University of Nevada, Reno, utilizing their access to demographic and housing data. And so I will start, and the reports are extensive. There's quite a bit of tables and graphs, and I will not waste your time this morning going over details, but I will just give you some of the key salient findings of both studies. And starting with the housing needs assessment, I guess the conclusion is there's a need for housing, but in going through some detail, according to the demographer, Churchill County gained 775 persons between 2021 and 2024. The demographers projected you will gain about another 561 persons between 2024 and 2028, but that's based on existing housing growth and historical population growth. So those numbers are very flexible and will depend on the addition of housing units. What's really interesting is how some of the demographic changes that indicate that a housing need exists. One of them is the family size and household sizes increased significantly in Churchill County between 2018 and 2022, which is the latest data we have from the U.S. Census. And that, because the ratio of kids actually declined slightly during the same time, that indicates to us that more adults are living together, whether family adults, whether they're related, or more roommate type situations. That indicates that there is a housing imbalance where more people are forced to live together. In good news, there has been significant income growth in the county, with the housing median household income increased 36% between 2018 and 22, family income increased by 43%, personal income by 35%, so over 30 to 40%, while CPI, inflation during the same period only increased by 16.5%. So you're outpacing inflation in your income growth. In other good news, the 700 some persons that did move to Churchill County in the last few years, were 60% of them were from outside of Nevada, 2% were actually outside of the country, but they are younger than your existing population, which is great for when we talk about the labor study. These are working age persons. Not only are they younger, their income is higher than the average income in the county. So that accounts for some of that income growth in the county, is that in-migration is coming in with higher incomes. On the economic side, your wages grew by 20% between 2019 and partial year through the third quarter of 2023. So 20% growth. At the same time, CPI increased by 19%. So again, slightly outpacing inflation, which is great news. In 2023, your wages are now $1,100 per week on average. Employment also grew by 6% during this time, with the biggest growth in management of companies, mining, and professional and technical services. Your biggest industries remain retail, healthcare, and public administration. And with that, with providing an overview of the county, we then tried to project your employment growth for the next 5 years. And we did that in 3 areas. One was natural employment growth. So your retail and healthcare and lodging persons who provide support as the area grows. So we estimated about 200 natural jobs would be generated. We looked at the 660 jobs planned for the modernization of NAS Fallon or Fallon NAS. And then we looked at, we spoke with Bruce Breslow, and we looked at projections for all of the industrial development that is planned for the county. And with that, we created a range of 218 jobs created for the industrial sector, and that's really just based on historical growth, to over 2,600 jobs if some of the projects, such as the CHIP project, get developed as planned. So in total, over the next 5 years, you can have as few as 1,100 to over 3,500 new jobs in the county through 2028. With that, obviously, and we'll talk about that a little bit later with the labor supply study, but with that, you need housing. You have approximately 11,000 housing units with an average year build of 1982. 37% of those homes were built between 1990 and 2009. There has been no single family attached units, so condo or townhomes built since 2010, and only 4 multifamily units since 2010. And so there's a bit of a discrepancy in the age of the product. Very few units are being added, and the types of the product being added, with multifamily and single family attached being very low. In fact, single family attached is only 3% of your total housing stock, and your apartments, we also call multifamily, is about 10%. The remainder is made up of 62% single family detached, so your typical single family units, and 25% manufactured homes. In good news, and I guess however you look at it, your home vacancy rates have declined from almost 6% in 2012 to 3% in 2022. Again, that is just the latest data we have from the census. And there's not much available on the market as of the timing of our report, which was approximately when we did the majority of the analysis was in May of this year. You had about 38 single family homes actively listed for sales, no condos or single family attached, and 4 manufactured homes. There was about 29 homes or apartment units being available for rent, being listed for rent. And with that, the good news is that there's quite a bit of supply coming down the pipeline, with 6,200 units in various stages of planning. Of those, 910 being multifamily or apartment units, and over 300 single family attached units. In looking at, when we talked about job projections, to fill those jobs, to provide housing to all of those employees, you need to construct about 152 to over 600 units per year, depending on the high or the low range of that employment projections. You're currently building about 105 units per year. So there's a significant gap in that construction versus what the potential demand may be. And with that, what drives the demand, I'll move on to our labor supply study. And we looked at that really more at a regional level. We provided information for Churchill County alone, but there's significant commuting ties between Lyons, Story, Carson, and Washoe. About 85% of employees in that 5-county region commute between the counties for work. Again, we talked about wages and employment, which we talked about similarly under the housing assessment, but significant growth both in employment and wages, and more to come. Regionally, the highest growth has been in the mining, construction, transportation, and manufacturing industries, which makes sense as that industrial sector continues to grow in the region. Churchill wages are below Washoe County, Story County, and Carson levels, but they are above Lyon County's levels. And as of March 2024, which was the data available at the time of our report, Churchill County had the lowest unemployment rate of all 4 of the counties. And with that, we did an analysis of excess unemployment, which is how many persons, we know how many people are unemployed based on DETR, Department of Employment Training and Rehabilitation data, but how many of those people are in the workforce, but they are not able to take on a job? So we looked at removing those persons, and what it shows is Churchill County had actually excess unemployment of negative 36 persons, which means that some people are taking on temporary employment, maybe multiple jobs for which will not last in the long term. And what that tells us, and this is consistent with the rest of the region, is that basically for every new job you create in Churchill County or across the region, you need 1 new person to move to the area to take up that job. The report contains a number of other studies of the health of industries with various wages by industries. I will skip all of that information, but there's quite a bit of that in the report if you're interested. But getting to really the meat of the report is GOED, Governor's Office of Economic Development, estimated a gain of 509 jobs between 2024 and 2027 for Churchill County. That falls within it is slightly on the low end of our projections, but they're not taking account, I believe, a lot of the, obviously not the NIS extension and some of the industrial projections that we included. But again, with that, all new employees will need to be new residents. Obviously, you will have some job shift in between jobs, but new residents will have to be created. And with that, that brings us back to the housing supply, where if you choose to grow at this pace in terms of employment, that the housing will need to be provided at that level. And primarily, the findings of both studies is you need multifamily and single-family attached product due to your younger population. The younger generation or younger populations typically don't have kids or are just starting with kids. They prefer that the mobility offered to them by either renting or purchasing at that lower level with the condo or townhouse product. So that's really the findings of the study is not only do you need more housing, it needs to be more diversified towards some of those cheaper and more mobility supported uses like apartments and single family attached. And that's all I have. I'm open to any questions. And again, my contact information is available. So if you have any questions afterwards, please contact me.
Thank you, Eugenia. Is there any questions for her? None? This is an action item. Okay, thank you for your time, Eugenia. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too. Did anyone have any of the letters received they wanted to pull? Do we have a motion on that one? No, we do. Can I get a motion for 7D?
So I move to approve the Churchill County Housing Assessment and Labor Study as presented.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Motion carries. All right, any letters received? None? Do we want to wait? Or do we gotta wait for liquor board, or can we go to there now? Wait till 9 o'clock?
Yeah, you have to wait till 9.
Okay, we'll move to new business, 10A, consideration and possible action, approval of the interlocal contract 2024-9 with the Carson Water Subconservancy District for the continuation of Lahontan Valley Water Level Measurement Program. That'll be Jim.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Once again, we're re-upping our 3-year contract that we went through application through the Carson Water Conservancy District on the maintenance of the measurements for the Lahontan Valley Water Level Measurement Program. Again, this is the grant that we have through ED's program, and that Chris Mahana then administers and monitors those wells across the county for us. And so we're asking for approval and reinstatement of this grant.
Is there any questions or comments about this agenda item? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the interlocal contract 2024-9 with the Carson Water Subconservancy District for the continuation of the Lahontan Valley Water Level Measurement Program.
Second it.
All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Motion carries. New business 10B, consideration and possible action, adoption of resolution 14-2024, assigning an additional portion of the ad valorem tax levy for cooperative extension for fiscal year 2024-2025 in the sum of 1 cent, making a total of 2 cents. Sherry?
Thank you. This is the additional money that was added to cooperative extension for the fiscal year 24-25 during our budget process. In last fiscal year, we were giving them 1.5 cents, and now we upped it to 2 cents. And we just need a resolution for the additional 1 cent above the minimum 1 cent, please.
Any questions or comments for Sherry?
Mr. Chairman, Jim Barbie for the record, just as an update, again, this money was to benefit cooperative extension and hiring additional positions to be placed here in Churchill County. It's my understanding that one of those positions has been filled, a second one has been offered and is coming to final conclusion, and the third one I believe has also been offered, but I haven't got an update on that, so they are moving forward with those positions here in Churchill County.
Okay, thank you, Jim. Any other questions or comments? If not, a motion, please.
I move to adopt resolution 14-2024, assigning an additional portion of the ad valorem tax levy in support of cooperative extension for fiscal year 2024-2025, and directing the comptroller to include it in the final budget to the Department of Taxation as required by Nevada revised statutes.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Motion carries. 10C, consideration and possible action, approval of resolution 15-2024, adopting and certifying Churchill County's tax rate for fiscal year 2024-2025. Sherry?
Thank you. This is another item that's required by NRS. It's just to approve the tax rate that was already approved during our final budget process, please.
Is there any questions or comments for Sherry? If not, a motion, please.
I'll make a motion to adopt resolution 15-2024, certifying the combined tax rate for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2024, and ending June 30th, 2025, as submitted.
Second it.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Motion carries. Did anyone want to pull anything from the consent agenda? If not, a motion to approve that.
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Motion carries. Now we'll have to wait around until 9 o'clock. Did anyone have anything they wanted to consider for future agenda items? Wait 1 minute, then we'll move to liquor board.
You can finish this meeting if you'd like and then move to liquor board independently.
So it can go a little bit later?
Absolutely.
Oh, let's finish this then. Commissioner and management staff reports. You have anything, Justin?
I have nothing to add.
I have nothing to add. Buzz, Sherry, Joe, Pam?
I was just going to mention that Linda is not here at the meeting today because they're doing a early voting mock election today, and then tomorrow's the voting mock election, so they're busy working on that in the office.
Okay. Sheriff, you have anything you want to add? Chris? Randy? Ann? Okay, well, finishing early. Claims and payroll, those are going around. Is there any public comment? Noting no public, we stand adjourned and we'll move to liquor board.
Sorry for coughing through the whole damn meeting.
That's okay. All right, we'll go ahead and call this liquor board meeting to order. At this time, is there any public comment? Noting no public, can I get a verification of the posting of the agenda, please?
Pam Moore for the record. The agenda was posted on, I think, June 26th. Let me look here. June 26th between the hours of 1 and 5 at the locations listed on the agenda in accordance with statutes.
Thank you, Pam. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda as submitted?
I move to approve the agenda as submitted.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. 5, review and adoption of the minutes of the meeting held on March 20th, 2024.
I move to approve the meeting minutes of March 20th, 2024.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Motion carries. Our first appointment, 6A, consideration and possible action, approval of a special event liquor license for Hannah Fisk and Jessica Peak of Peachy Queens Traveling Tavern, Fisk Peak LLC, for the Cantaloupe Festival to be held on August 23rd through the 25th, 2024. Sheriff?
Good morning, Chairman, Board. Sheriff Richard Hickox for the record. Per county code, as well as the Nevada revised statutes, I completed the background as required. I found nothing that would preclude us from issuing a liquor license to them.
Thank you, Sheriff. Any questions or comments for the sheriff? If not, a motion, please.
I move to approve a special event liquor license for Hannah Fisk and Jessica Peak of Peachy Queens Traveling Tavern, Fisk Peak LLC, for the Cantaloupe Festival to be held on August 23rd through the 25th, 2024.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Motion carries. Thank you, Sheriff. At this time, is there any public comment? Noting no public, we stand adjourned on this meeting.